I had always been drawn to my grandmother's house, a venerable structure nestled in the heart of the countryside, its walls echoing with decades of whispered secrets and untold stories. It was a place out of time, where the modern bustle seemed a distant dream, and the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and memories. My grandmother, a woman of quiet strength and enigmatic wisdom, had lived there since before I was born, and each visit felt like stepping into another world. The family gathering was a rare occasion, bringing together relatives I barely knew and those I knew all too well. The house, with its creaking floors and antique furniture, seemed to absorb our presence, becoming more alive with each echoing laugh and hushed conversation. My grandmother, a slender figure with silver hair and eyes that held a lifetime of stories, greeted me with her usual warmth. Yet, beneath her welcoming smile, I sensed a caution, an unspoken warning that hung in the air like a faint mist. It was during a quiet moment, as the evening wore on and the house settled into a comfortable lull, that she took my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Becca," she said in a tone that brooked no argument, "there's a room upstairs, at the end of the hallway. The last door on the right. I must ask you never to go in there." Her gaze held mine, and in her eyes, I saw a flicker of something I couldn't place, fear, perhaps, or sorrow. The warning only fueled my curiosity. The house had always been an open book to me, each room a chapter of my family's history. But this forbidden room, this hidden narrative, it called to me with a siren's allure. That night, as the house slept and the moon cast a silver glow through the windows, I found myself drawn to the upstairs hallway. The wooden floorboards creaked under my cautious steps, the sound a sharp contrast to the silent, slumbering house. My heart pounded in my chest, a rhythmic drumming that seemed to echo in the stillness. I reached the last door on the right. It was an ordinary door, worn and slightly ajar, the paint peeling at the edges. Yet, as I pushed it open, a shiver ran down my spine. I was about to step into the unknown, into a room that had remained a mystery even in the familiarity of my grandmother's house. The air inside was still, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. The room was a snapshot of a different era, untouched by time. Antique furniture lay draped in dust covers, and old family photos adorned the walls, their faces frozen in perpetual smiles and stoic gazes. As I ventured further, an odd sensation washed over me. It was as if the room existed in a bubble, disconnected from the world outside its walls. The ticking of the old grandfather clock by the door sounded muffled, as if underwater, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. I didn't realize it then, but I had stepped into a realm where time didn't flow as it should, a room where the past and present coexisted in a silent, eerie dance. And with each passing moment, I was becoming a part of its story, a thread woven into the fabric of its timeless mystery. That first night in the room lingered in my thoughts like a half-remembered dream. The following morning, as sunlight spilled through the lace curtains, casting dappled shadows across the breakfast table, the house felt different, as if I had brushed against its hidden heart and come away changed. Despite my grandmother's warning, my curiosity was a tide I couldn't hold back. Under the guise of exploring the house, I found myself standing before the forbidden room once again. This time, daylight lent the room a less foreboding, almost mundane air. But the moment I crossed the threshold, that same sense of dislocation, of being unmoored from time, enveloped me. I began to explore the room in earnest, my fingertips tracing the contours of objects that felt both familiar and utterly alien. The photographs on the wall were portals to the past, showing generations of family members whose stories were etched in sepia tones and solemn expressions. In a corner, beneath a layer of dust, I found an old diary, its leather cover cracked and worn. Flipping through the pages, I was drawn into a world of secret thoughts and hidden fears, penned by an ancestor I never knew. The diary spoke of the room in veiled terms, hinting at strange occurrences and unexplained events. As the hours slipped by, the room became my world. Outside, time seemed to race forward at a breakneck pace, the sun arcing across the sky in a blur. But inside, each second stretched out, languid and heavy. I felt a growing obsession, a need to unravel the enigma of the room. There were more diaries, more photographs, each a piece of the puzzle that was slowly taking shape in my mind. The family, it seemed, had always known about the room's peculiar nature, but had kept it shrouded in secrecy. My visits became more frequent, my absences longer. The family, engrossed in their own affairs, didn't question my whereabouts. Or perhaps they chose not to. The room was a silent agreement, a collective unspoken truth that everyone avoided. One evening, as I sat poring over an old photo album, I heard a soft whisper, like a sigh carried on a breeze. I froze, my heart racing. The room was empty, yet I felt a presence, an unseen gaze that prickled my skin. It was then that I realized the room was not just a keeper of time, but perhaps something more sentient, more aware. That night, I lay in bed, the moon casting its pale light through the window. The room's secrets called to me, a siren song that promised answers, yet filled me with an inexplicable dread. I knew I had to return, to face whatever lay hidden in the depths of its timeless heart. But as I drifted into sleep, a part of me wondered if I was the hunter or the hunted in this strange twisted game. The more time I spent in the room, the more it began to affect me. Days seemed to blend into each other, marked only by my excursions into that timeless space. The real world, with its predictable rhythms and familiar faces, started to feel distant, like a story I was no longer a part of. Each visit unveiled more layers of my family's past. I discovered letters and journals, their words weaving tales of joy, sorrow, and, increasingly, fear. It became clear that the room had not only been a silent witness to my family's history, but it actively shaped it in ways both subtle and profound. The whispers grew more frequent, no longer just fleeting sounds, but murmurs of coherent speech. I strained to listen, to understand, but they were always just beyond my comprehension, like conversations heard through a thick wall. One evening, as I sat absorbed in an old journal, the room chilled suddenly, the air turning icy in a matter of seconds. My breath misted in front of me, and the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of voices. Panic surged within me, a primal instinct to flee from something unseen and unknown. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the room fell silent. The cold receded, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease. I realized then that I was no longer merely an observer in this room, I was a participant in something far beyond my understanding. Despite the fear, my obsession only deepened. The room became my secret sanctuary, a place where I could delve into mysteries that both terrified and fascinated me. But as I delved deeper, the boundary between the room and the rest of the house began to blur. Time outside seemed to accelerate with each passing day, the faces of my family aging rapidly in brief glimpses, while I remained unchanged. I started to feel a profound disconnection, not just from my family, but from myself. It was as if the room was slowly erasing my place in the world, rewriting my story into its own timeless narrative. The climax of my strange journey came unexpectedly. It was a night like any other, the house quiet, its inhabitants lost in slumber. I made my way to the room, drawn by an irresistible pull. But as I stepped inside, I realized that something was different. The air was charged with a tangible energy, the whispers louder, more insistent. I felt a presence, an otherworldly pressure that weighed heavily on my shoulders. And then, from the corners of my eyes, I saw them shapes, barely discernible in the dim light, moving with slow, deliberate grace. I turned to face them, my heart pounding in my chest. The shapes solidified into forms, ghostly apparitions that bore the unmistakable features of my ancestors, their faces etched with sorrow and longing. They moved around me in a silent procession, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in silent pleas. I realized with a jolt of horror that these were the spirits of those who had been trapped in the room, lost in its timeless embrace. I tried to speak, to reach out to them, but they seemed oblivious to my presence, caught in a loop of their own eternal moments. The room pulsed with their energy, a vortex of lost souls spinning around me. In that moment, I understood the true nature of the room. It was a prison, a place where time was both a captor and a jailer, holding its victims in a perpetual state of limbo. And I, through my own curiosity and obsession, had become its latest inmate. As the apparitions swirled around me, their faces a blur of anguish and despair, I knew I had to find a way to break the cycle, to free not only them, but myself from the room's cursed grasp. But the question that haunted me, as I stood amidst the ghosts of my lineage, was whether I was already too late to escape the fate that had claimed them. That night marked a turning point in my journey with the timeless room. The apparitions, my ancestors trapped in a perpetual limbo, continued their ghostly procession around me. Their presence was overwhelming, each face a mirror of the room's tragic history. It was a surreal tableau, one that transcended the boundaries of reality, and delved into the realm of the otherworldly. As I stood there, rooted to the spot, a profound sense of urgency gripped me. I needed to act, to find a way to sever the room's hold on us. My mind raced, sifting through the scraps of knowledge gleaned from the diaries and letters. The room, the creation of a misguided ancestor's experiment with time, had become a vortex, ensnaring those who dared to uncover its secrets. In a desperate bid for answers, I turned to the spirits, trying to communicate with them. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How can I help you?" To my astonishment, one of the apparitions, a woman with sorrowful eyes that seemed to pierce through the veil of time, stopped and turned towards me. Her lips moved silently, and in a moment of chilling clarity, I heard her voice in my head, a faint echo from another time. "Free us," she whispered, her voice tinged with an unspeakable sadness. The others paused, their ghostly gazes fixating on me. It was as if a dam had broken, and a flood of whispered pleas filled my mind. The air crackled with their collective desire for release. The room itself seemed to respond to their cries, the walls pulsating with a strange energy. I felt as if I were standing at the heart of a great storm, a maelstrom of temporal forces swirling around me. In that moment of communion, I understood what I needed to do. I remembered a passage from one of the journals, a cryptic reference to a ritual that could reset the balance of the room. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance we had. I began to gather the necessary items, scattered throughout the room. An old pocket watch that had belonged to the ancestor who created this mess, a candlestick from the same era, and a handful of salt. The ritual was a patchwork of arcane instructions and intuition, a last-ditch effort to mend what had been broken. With trembling hands, I arranged the items in a circle around me, the pocket watch at the center. I lit the candle, its flame casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air grew heavy, charged with anticipation. I closed my eyes and began to recite the words from the journal, each syllable a resonant echo in the stillness of the room. The words were foreign, a language lost to time, but they flowed from me with an unnatural ease. As I spoke, the room's energy intensified, a tangible force that pressed against my skin. The spirit's whispers grew louder, a chorus of desperation and hope. The climax of the ritual approached, and I braced myself for whatever would come. With the final indication, I opened the pocket watch, releasing its trapped time. A blinding light engulfed the room, a piercing white that consumed everything in its path. The air screamed with the release of pent-up temporal forces, and I felt myself being swept up in the maelstrom. In that moment, suspended in the eye of the storm, I saw the faces of my ancestors, their expressions shifting from despair to peace. One by one, they began to fade, their spectral forms dissolving into the light. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the chaos subsided. The light receded, leaving me alone in the room, the silence a stark contrast to the tumultuous events that had just unfolded. I opened my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was as it had always been, the antiques, the photographs, the dust. But something had changed. The oppressive air, the sense of being watched, was gone. I stood up, my legs shaky, and made my way to the door. As I stepped out of the room, I felt an overwhelming sense of release, as if I had been holding my breath for an eternity. The spirits of my ancestors were gone, freed from the room's grasp. And I, too, had been released from the obsession that had consumed me. But as I closed the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something of the room had stayed with me, a lingering connection to the mysteries of time that I had barely begun to understand. The house was eerily quiet as I descended the stairs, the weight of what had transpired in the room hanging heavily on my shoulders. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts, struggling to process the surreal experience I had just endured. My grandmother was waiting for me in the living room, her expression a mix of concern and knowing. It was clear she had sensed a shift in the house, the release of the energy that had been pent up for so long. "Becca," she began, her voice soft yet firm, "I see you've discovered the truth about the room." I nodded, unable to find the words to describe what had happened. I sat down beside her, the familiar creak of the old sofa somehow grounding me in reality. She took my hand, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "That room," she said, "was the creation of your great-great-grandfather. He was a man of science, but his curiosity led him down a dark path. He believed he could manipulate time, bend it to his will. But he was wrong. Instead, he created a trap, a place where time lost all meaning." Her words painted a picture of a man consumed by his ambition, a cautionary tale of the dangers of tampering with forces beyond human understanding. "The room became a family secret, a burden passed down through the generations," she continued. "I was warned about it, as I warned you. But I knew one day its truth would need to be confronted." I listened, a sense of awe mingling with my lingering fear. My family's history, intertwined with the mysterious room, was like a tapestry of hidden truths and silent sufferings. "I entered the room once, many years ago," my grandmother confessed, her gaze distant. "I felt its pull, the same as you. But I realized the danger it posed, not just to our family, but to anyone who stumbled upon its secrets." She explained how she had learned of a ritual, a way to potentially neutralize the room's power. But fear and uncertainty had held her back. It was a decision she had wrestled with, one that now seemed fated to be mine. "We need to ensure no one else falls prey to the room," she said firmly. "The ritual you performed, it has weakened the room's hold, but we must seal it, once and for all." Together, we gathered the necessary materials. Salt, herbs, and an old family talisman that had been passed down through the generations. The ritual was simple yet solemn, a final farewell to a part of our family's legacy that had brought so much pain and mystery. We stood before the door, the air thick with the scent of burning herbs. My grandmother recited the incantation, her voice steady and clear. I joined in, the words feeling more powerful, more final, than anything I had ever spoken. As the last word was uttered, a shiver ran through the house, as if it too was releasing a long-held breath. We marked the door with the talisman, a symbol of closure and protection. Stepping back, I felt a sense of completion, a chapter of my family's story coming to a definitive end. The room had been a source of fascination and fear, but now it was just another part of the house, its power diminished, its secrets laid to rest. As we walked away, leaving the room in a silent vigil, I couldn't help but feel a pang of loss. The room had been a dark part of my life, but it had also been a journey of discovery, a path that had led me to a deeper understanding of my family and myself. The next morning, I awoke to a house that felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. My family, oblivious to the events of the night, went about their routines, the echoes of the past silently fading into the background. I knew, however, that the room would always be a part of me, a reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of the known world. And as I packed my bags to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that, in some way, the room's legacy would continue, its story not fully told. As I left my grandmother's house, the sun casting long shadows across the gravel driveway, a profound sense of change enveloped me. The house, with its tall windows and ivy-covered walls, looked the same as it always had, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The drive back to my own life was filled with reflection. The timeless room, now sealed and dormant, lingered in my thoughts, a chapter of my history that felt both distant and intimately close. The experiences within those walls had altered my perception of time, family, and the unseen forces that weave through our lives. Days turned into weeks, and life resumed its familiar rhythm. But there were moments, fleeting and unsettling, when I felt a strange disconnection, a sense of being out of sync with the world around me. It was as if the room had left its mark, a subtle echo of its temporal distortions that occasionally rippled through my existence. My family never spoke of the room or the events that transpired. It was as if a silent agreement had been reached, an understanding that some secrets were better left unexplored. My grandmother and I shared an unspoken bond, a mutual recognition of the journey we had undertaken and the truths we had uncovered. I found myself drawn to old family albums, tracing the lineage of those who had come before me. Their faces, once just frozen smiles in black and white, now held a deeper meaning. I saw in them the legacy of the room, the lives it had touched, and the stories it had silently witnessed. Occasionally, I would dream of the room. In these dreams, it was alive, a realm of shadows and whispers where time flowed like a languid river. I would wake with a start, the sensation of being watched lingering in the corners of my mind. As time passed, the room's influence faded, becoming a distant memory, a story to be pondered in quiet moments. Yet, the sense of otherworldliness it had imparted remained, a subtle undercurrent in the ebb and flow of my daily life. In moments of solitude, I would find myself reflecting on the nature of time, on the threads of fate that bind us to our past and propel us into the future. The room, with its timeless mysteries and spectral inhabitants, had opened a door to a world I had never known, a world where the boundaries of reality were fluid and malleable. And so, the story of the timeless room became a part of my own, a narrative woven into the fabric of my being. It was a reminder of the unseen depths that lie beneath the surface of our lives, of the mysteries that hover just beyond the reach of understanding. As I moved forward, carrying the legacy of the room within me, I couldn't help but feel that, in some way, it was still with me, a silent companion on my journey through life. The room was sealed, its secrets locked away, but its essence, the eerie sense of timelessness, lingered, a haunting melody in the symphony of my existence. And in that lingering presence, I found both a warning and a wonder, a testament to the unfathomable mysteries that dwell in the shadowed corners of our world, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be understood.